Welcome to Capitol Preview, a weekly bipartisan discussion with Iowa legislators about the key issues facing our state. Brought to you by Mediacom.
Hi, welcome to another edition of Capitol Preview. My name is Bill Peard. I'm the Executive Vice President of the Iowa Cable and Telecommunications Association. This show is brought to you by Mediacom, where we explore issues that are important to Iowans, and we invite your representatives and senators down here to the studios to kind of have a conversation about what's going on at the state capitol now. Our guest today is Senator Tony Bisignano, District 17. He's the Democrat from South Des Moines. Senator, good to see you this morning.
Good to see you, Bill.
Thanks for coming in. Hope I didn't butcher your name.
No, you did fine. I've heard a lot worse.
Hey, this is a kind of a conversational interview, so I'm just going to jump right in and say, what's the deal with the bill that passed the Iowa Senate last week that would change voting requirements for some decisions by the Iowa Supreme Court?
Well, I don't know of anything more overreaching. We're equal branches of government, majority rules, and for some reason, the Senate Republicans felt that there's a need to go to a supermajority with the Supreme Court. It's a very bad idea. Currently, we have 7 justices and 4-3 rules. Mm-hmm. This will require 5 justices to render a decision. But the irony of this is that I'm sure it'll get to the Supreme Court and probably will be overruled unanimous, but I'd like to actually see it overruled 4-3.
Yeah. Now, the other thing is we're going to go from judicial to the state budget. What's going on with the state budget? That just seems to be the...
Well, I guess it's up to what budget you're talking about.
Right.
We're still dealing with this year's budget. We were expecting a de-appropriation proposed, but that has not been forthcoming. So now we're hearing rumors that they're going to play some games with the federal savings from the federal tax cut and try to avoid a de-appropriation bill at all. But we've heard nothing on next year's budget, and revenues, as we all hear, they're growing. They're growing very slowly, but we've not seen any proposal yet as to how we're going to balance next year's budget, which we assume will require more cuts.
So, Senator, will you explain a little bit more about the de-appropriation part of this budget? I'm sure a lot of people have heard it. They don't quite understand what you guys are trying to achieve by that. And when you say they, you're talking about the Republicans.
The Republicans and the governor. When we passed last year's budget, when we left the legislature around May, and by June 30th, we're supposed to have a balanced budget. Well, that didn't balance, and so because of revenues, we had to do de-appropriation, and the governor borrowed money from our rainy day funds on our surplus, and then we got more revenue estimates. That wasn't good, mm-hmm. and so they had to cut more, and so services were cut. Employees, were laid off. Courts were dramatically cut, and so we're still in a budget year that should have been balanced by now, hasn't been balanced, and we're looking to next year's budget before we even know what the bottom line is for this year.
So those are permanent cuts by state employees,
They're
right?
permanent cuts, yes, they are.
It's kind of a hard thing to get your head around a little bit. What would be the impact if the legislature does away with property tax backfill? I know cities are extremely concerned about that backfill issue right now.
Cities ought to be extremely concerned. Schools, counties. The legislature 4 years ago, 5 years ago, promised in lieu of a massive corporate tax cut and tax cuts on multifamily dwellings, apartment complexes, that the cities, because of the tax cut and the money they would lose, that the state would backfill that. And it didn't take very long. Even the next year there was rumblings that they wanted to discontinue that. So we're looking at, for example, here, Des Moines would lose somewhere in the area of $5.5 million Polk County would lose $6 million. The schools would lose $5 million. These are real cuts. And I believe March 15th is the deadline for counties to certify their budget. The city voted last Thursday on their budget, and this hasn't even been acted upon yet, but it's anticipated they're going to do this. This will be additional reductions in the city, county, and school budgets that weren't anticipated, that didn't have an opportunity to be looked at. So it's immediate service cuts, employee cuts, public safety cuts, senior care cuts, street repairs, across the board. And I think it speaks very poorly of the state that they make the promise, they give the cut, and then you pay for the party.
So we're going to be experiencing some instant pain.
Very instant pain, very instant pain.
So why is it that you think that they have reneged on the backfill? Is it because the budget's such a mess that they feel like they can't do the backfill, or is it even that?
Well, I don't know necessarily
connected?
if we were in good times, if their intentions truly were to continue their word and backfill this cut. It's kind of like, we've given the cut, we've taken the credit, we're the good guys, and now there's some pain to pay for this party. And now the state has chosen to move on to new tax cuts because we want more credit, we want new credit, and now they're looking at income tax cuts. And so let's just pass it on to local governments to actually take the responsibility, and we'll just move on to a new tax cut and take credit for that.
And so when you're talking about the backfill, you're talking about the money that was lost by lowering the corporate tax rate, correct?
Yes.
That was the money that wasn't realized by the city that they need, or cities or whoever, counties.
City, counties, and schools.
Schools. What are employers telling you that their number one problem is these days? And maybe that's a list and not just
well,
an answer. Yeah.
I suppose there's a number of things that employers would say, but all in all, on any given day in the state of Iowa, and this is really hard to believe when I saw the figures, is our workforce development on its site posts about 58 to 60,000 jobs. That's a significant amount of job openings in a state that's basically at full employment.
Right.
But the biggest problem we have is skilled workforce.
Yeah.
And so, Iowa really needs to concentrate on community college funding and apprenticeships, job training, and help these employers specifically with the skills and talent that they need. Unfortunately, with our budget and the priorities of the legislature has been to cut education. At the same time, they know what employers need and they're trying to grow Iowa. We're shrinking the dollars going to job training and apprenticeships and community colleges.
So I don't want to put words in your mouth, but it's about setting priorities, right?
Absolutely.
What are the top priorities that we absolutely need to get
It's all about
out of that state house?
State government, any budget, your budget at home, my budget at home. We can say what our priorities are, but I think my good friend Senator Biden said, show me your budget and I'll show you your priorities.
Yeah.
And it's true with government.
Yeah. Yep. Can you give us an update on the Medicaid revitalization or privatization? That's another thing that is just
Well, it was another promise by state government that took $5 billion of a $7.3 billion budget, which is our Medicaid funding, and told us that we were going to save money and we were going to increase the quality of care and make people healthier if we privatized it. And we turned it over. They turned it over. It wasn't without a legislative vote. It was an executive action by Governor Branstad and Lieutenant Governor Reynolds. And we turned it over to 3 managed care companies. And what we've seen is a disaster. We've seen, number one, is the providers aren't being paid. And the providers that aren't being paid have choices. They either withdraw from service to Medicaid eligible people, which reduces access, or they discontinue seeing the patients that need to be seen, or they're borrowing money. And they're requiring providers to go out and actually borrow, and some up to millions of dollars, and then wait to be paid, and they're not being paid. And we're seeing services that were provided before that aren't being provided now. And
That's a pretty scary prospect.
it's a very scary prospect because it's not getting any better. I think we're down to 2 providers. And we see no hope in sight. This was a deal that we were going to save money. And in fact, we've had to pay more money than what we contracted for. And I don't care where you go in Iowa, this is one common thread through every legislator's district is the disaster of the privatization of Medicaid.
Yeah, it's happening nationwide. What will the legislature do to cut the taxes this year? I mean, we've been kind of touching on all this all the way through this thing, but I'd like to hear your answer on that.
Government runs on revenue.
Right.
And in my opinion, there's 2 things that you cut taxes for. One is because you have a surplus. And so you return that money to the people who have been paying or overpaying the taxes that you don't need. That's a good reason. You know, things are going well and the economy's growing and we're collecting more taxes. And so we see that we have a surplus, so we do a tax reduction. The second reason would be to stimulate the economy. And we did a tax bill in the Senate, the Republican proposed last week, that would cut taxes $1 billion. $1 billion while we're still a year back in balancing a budget that needs de-appropriation. And this particular proposal would cut $200 to $300 million out of this next year's budget. And so that's going to get into service cuts. And it absolutely, the irony was it was quoted in a Register editorial where the vice chair of Ways and Means said that he was hoping that this tax cut would spur economic growth. He was counting on it. And in the same article, the chair of Ways and Means and the floor manager of the bill said that economic stimulation was not factored into this bill. They weren't counting on it. It wasn't a part, and that if in fact it did, it would be great. Mm-hmm. But it was not a part or a factor. So I don't think this bill's real. I don't think the governor is going to take this bill, and they're working off the governor's bill in the House.
Yeah. We have a little extra time, so I'm gonna tempt you, and certainly if you don't choose, if you're not comfortable in the answer, but can you handicap the gubernatorial race a little bit? I know you have a colleague, Senator
Bolton
is running for governor as well.
I think what I'm really pleased is we have a great field.
Yeah,
you really do have a great field of candidates, and Senator Bolton I've served with. He's the next generation of politicians, of elected officials, and he's very bright and he's articulate. I think his issues are in the right place, and so I've chose to support him. Fred Hubbell, I think, would do a fine job. I have every reason to believe that if Hubbell was the nominee, that Democrats would have nothing to worry about. I think he's in the right place. And then we have Kathy Glasson, who appears to be about in the third slot, but we have John Norris, who's very good. We have Andy McGuire, who's very good. So
it's been a long time, hasn't it?
It's been a long time
since this kind of a lineup.
That's right. That we've had this kind of lineup, and so I have my prediction of who I think, and I won't say, but I'm with Nate Bolton. I'd like to see someone at his age, with his enthusiasm, with new energy, step up, and I think he'd be an excellent candidate against Governor Reynolds.
Well, thank you very much, Senator. You've been absolutely great. Learned a lot from you this morning. Thank you for tuning in, and we appreciate our guests coming in. Senator Tony Bisignano, District 17, Democrat from South Des Moines. Thank you, and stay tuned for another episode of Capitol Preview.